Why, hello there, Homeworthy. I'm Nikki Lindman. Welcome to my flat in Southeast London. Come on in.
You're watching Homeworthy, where we believe every home has a story.
Hi, Homeworthy. I'm Nikki Lindman. Welcome to my flat in Southeast London. I am a bit of a international brat, I would say. I was born in Singapore. I come from a mixed bag of ancestry, Finnish, Swedish, German, Jewish as well. There's a little bit of everything in there. I've done my ancestry.com, so I absolutely know that it's quite diverse, but I grew up in Southeast Asia. We traveled and lived in Australia for a little bit. I lived in the UK when I was little. And then when I was 18, I moved to London to go to art school here. And I never looked back. I've been here 25 years next year. My background is a graphic designer, worked in a lot of fashion magazines, and somehow got into advertising, and now I'm a global creative director. I work for a fashion brand here in the UK that is based all over the world, so it's kind of coming full circle back from where I started. I've been living in this area on and off for 15 years. Actually, my art school university is about 10 minutes away from here, so I'm very familiar in the area. And I would always walk my dog Finn along this street, and I always looked up at this building, and I'd always say to him, one day this is going to be our home. And actually 2 days before I signed my divorce papers, I just happened to look online, and this flat was available, and it was in the building that I've always sort of put out into the universe that one day I would have. Walked in and saw that it wasn't quite in the state that it should be, but I could see a lot of potential, especially for me and my creative, my creative eye. I saw there's a lot of opportunity to make a mark on it, and put an offer in. 20 minutes later it was accepted. The next day I signed my divorce papers. I really believe that everything happens for a reason. If there was any proof of that, it is this home. This is the grand entrance, or it's quite a little humble entrance. But I like to make it feel grand with the art that we had, and also having this sort of split colorway, because it is quite a dark little nook. It's the only dark nook in the whole flat, so we wanted to brighten up with some sunny mustard. So it's grand because I like to kind of overwhelm it intentionally with artwork, especially when you first walk in. And there's a couple of pieces here that are quite significant to me. This one, because tomatoes are, I don't know how they can be anyone's favorite fruit, but they're definitely my favorite fruit / veg. It's also got this really lovely Italian feel to it, but she's a photographer that I've worked with in my day-to-day career. And this is her sort of side hustle, where she makes non-commercial pieces of art, but she constructs these beautiful pieces to look like they should be classical paintings, but it's all done in camera on film. And I have also taken inspiration. I've got this beautiful portrait of my maternal grandmother, who was Swedish, and prior to the war, she was actually she grew up in the circus. She's probably the only one that's I've ever heard run away from the circus, but she was part of a trapeze family, and then she became a model. And I've got this beautiful picture of her portrait, and I just actually kind of wanted to do a gallery of strong female portraits. So some are pieces that I've inherited, others are kind of abstract, eclectic portraits by Finnish female artists, which is my other part of my heritage. My dad is a Swedish Finn. So I've turned one side of the gallery into a hallway of strong female portraits with my grandmother at the heart of it. And then these are pieces that I have cultivated and accrued through working with brilliant female artists themselves through my work. So that's the sort of first hit when you walk into the flat. I want you to be overwhelmed with color and energy and strong female presence and creativity. So this rug is actually, it's the only rug I have ever bought. And it is the last piece that I bought after I had, we'd moved back into the flat after I had it sort of remodeled and sort of had everything, rejigged around with the kitchen and the bathroom. So it was the piece that I purchased. Usually all my other rugs have been rugs that I have had passed down to me or have been bought for me at significant stages in my life. It's a bit of a family tradition. Again, because of, us sort of living and traveling everywhere. And I think just my parents were obsessed with rugs. We had a lot of them knocking about. But this piece is Moroccan, and I got it because I've got so many colors going on in the flat. From obviously the mustard, the minute you walk through the door, to the olive greens, to I've got some putty colors, and I've got bright red. It's pulling on a lot of those different themes that I like. Conceptually, I like the idea that the minute you walk in, you've got a cacophony of colors that then you'll see kind of erupt throughout the rest of the space. But I really like this because I couldn't find a spot in the flat for hot pink. And I love it as a color, and I kind of still fancy the idea of a chair or a sofa in hot pink, but haven't got there yet. But this managed to bring in that sort of hot pink bit of spice in amongst the palette that is working throughout the flat. So I thought it's just the perfect sort of entry runner into the rest of the space. Okay, so now I'm going to take you into the rest of the flat and we'll see how it all comes together. This flat erupts the minute you turn around the corner, which is another thing that I loved about it when I first came in and saw it with the sales agent. But I wanted to talk about this piece because it's, again, when I saw the spot, I knew I had this piece in storage, and I had been looking for a wall that just would have been the perfect spot for it, where it didn't overwhelm the space, but also had a nice sort of dominant effect. And I found this, oh gosh, it was probably about 15 years ago now. It's an antique from Germany, from a high school, from what I was told, or sort of a university classroom, where it's the process for how to make plastic, which is obviously not terribly sustainable these days, but they made a beautiful piece of artwork demonstrating something that's probably quite ugly these days in terms of what they're making, but it's the process of how to make PVC. You've got the lovely sheet, tubing, and molded version, but I just love the colors. I love the dominant black in it. Which is why I intentionally framed it really heavily as well in black. I love the duck shell blue that they use throughout, and just, I love really constructivist sort of industrialist art. I always have. I think it's my graphic design background. I like things with order and function as much as being a maximalist. In terms of design, this feels really pleasing. And I just like how banal it is. They put craft and effort into something that's quite a banal, boring subject matter. So this house, when I first walked into it, was chrome heaven, which is not my favorite material or color. So it's one of the things I wanted to get rid of. And when I spoke to Saskia and James, they suggested these fab, I mean, they're all slightly different throughout the house, but this sort of dark steel effect, or they're actually made of steel, replacements for light fixtures. So all my light switches have a little bit of quirkiness to them in terms of how they look. They look like they could be from the Victorian times, but I loved how the color was recessive. It didn't bling. It's got a matte finish to it, but it also felt like it kind of would have been here 150 years ago, and has the kind of treatment of the crystal itself. So again, just a little bit of continuity. But I like the fact that they look like they've always been here. We didn't just pop them in. I banned chrome everywhere in this house because there was a lot of chrome when I bought the flat. And I wanted to bring up the sort of material that's on the crystal to kind of reflect the crystal elsewhere. So I'm going to take you into the dining area because obviously everything's open plan. There's no room, thankfully, no walls. Although there is this massive steel girder here, which I love, and it runs throughout the house. But this is where we will typically eat most of the week, and it's certainly where we have dinner parties. It's an old, well, not that old, but it's a classic piece. It's a Matthew Hilton piece that I invested in about a decade ago, and it pulls out and it's amazing. We can have big old dinner parties here. And I've got my bar area, which we definitely accumulated during lockdown. We became cocktail experts, which I'm sure pretty much everyone else did as well. There's nothing new there. But the way I wanted to sort of pull this space together to make it feel like, even though there wasn't walls, there was a little bit of a sense of an area, and it feels like it's delineated from the rest of the space, was obviously more of artwork. And these all have sentimental meaning. I don't buy things just because they've got an expensive price tag. In fact, some of the time, they're not worth anything on monetary value, but they're worth the world to me. This is a piece that I bought for my partner's 40th birthday. It's an original print from, I think it's from 1460, and it's the first printing of the village where he comes from in northern Italy ever existing. So I did a bit of research on that. I like to put meaning into everything. I run by concepts. I'm a creative director, so an idea has to run through everything. This is a piece that he got for me from a local Italian artist. This is one of my favorite pieces of all time, and I'm very glad I managed to get it up and have pride of place in the flat. It's a piece by she's a Belgian artist called Francesca, who I actually worked with. She used to be an art director in advertising, and I was her mentor for a couple of years. And she just posted this piece on her Instagram, and I was like, I absolutely love it. But it was actually all done digitally, and she said, you know what, let me make it for you for real. So she went and painted and cut out, and it's all collagey. And she's gone on now to leave advertising and to become an amazing fine artist. So I feel like I got in there early, and I'm just really proud to champion her. And these are some vintage, they're from a glass company in Finland called Arabia, which you should definitely look up. They've got 100-odd years of history of making beautiful art glass pieces. But these are ceramic pieces that depict different scenes from the Viking sagas. So they're different sort of mythological stories around my Viking heritage. And this is a original poster from the 60s from Poland, promoting a circus, which again, I just, getting my hot pinks in there where I can. But these are two girls that live in London who started a business just before lockdown, and I bought a couple of pieces of them, and they're just blown up as well. So I've got a good little eye for emerging talent, I would like to hope. And this is my favorite. This is the last thing I put up recently. And my dad died when I was 20. And this is a piece that he drew when he was 4 years old for his mother, so for my grandmother. And there's a little note on there about, to my grandmother, I love you so much. And he's got his signature on there. And I never knew him to be a creative person. He was a businessman. So this means a lot to me that obviously he had a creative flair. Maybe it just got died down a little bit because of, life and work. But he obviously had a little creative soul in there. So that's all just sort of, there's no rhyme or reason. They're just things that mean something to me and have a place in my heart. And I want to bring them all to a place where I bring people who have a place in my heart to eat. So there is a little bit of a logic to the madness. So not only have I got this beautiful piece, which when I bought it, I was like, this is going to be my heirloom piece. It's obviously got great Scandinavian mid-century modern accents to it, but it's, it will age with me. But also, it managed to be the piece that didn't make my old Turkish kilim feel just, disproportionate. It all sort of falls together. And this was given to me by my mom just when I moved to London when I was 18. So it was a sort of goodbye present from moving out of the house and about to start my own home. And I've always loved it. I've had it repaired a few times. It's a very old piece. I believe it's about 150 years old. So, I want to take care of it because it's obviously survived a couple of lifetimes already. And, I mentioned green is a big deal for me. These I bought a long time ago. They're really old and faded now. Gooby chairs from Denmark. They're sort of quite a shape now that, I see a lot around. And hopefully, there's sort of been reproductions of it, but these are the original ones. And what I love about the green velvet is that, people can be really precious about velvet. I quite like it to look worn and faded and scuffed, and I want all of that age in there. I don't like things that look too pristine. So actually, when I got these, I didn't love them as much because they looked too new and too vibrant, but now they're sort of settled into and matured into themselves. So they were the beginning of my green affair as well, that I pulled throughout the house. I'm a big hunter. As I said, I'm a magpie. I like to find things that shouldn't necessarily work, or I don't have the purpose they're meant for, and I'll repurpose them. But I was actually over in Chelsea in West London. I popped out of a doctor's appointment and I nipped into a garden centre, and these lemons, there's two of them, they're a pair, these lemon pots, which I believe were going to be used for outdoor garden, furniture or tableware. But they were getting rid of them and they were selling them for, I think it was like 80 quid for the pair, which sounds quite high, but subsequently I've seen other shops buy and stock, and Liberty's has these now, and they're going for hundreds and hundreds of pounds, but I took them off their hands for a steal, and anything like that I will absolutely put pride of place, because, if you can find something that everyone else is paying through the nose and you're getting it for a bargain, why not? It just adds to the pleasure. And they kind of straddle my entrance into my red room, my Singapore room. I just, a bit of sunshine, why not? I don't want to use them as plant pots. I just like them for what they are, a little bit of cheeky artwork and design. I know most people are afraid of snakes, and I think because I grew up in Southeast Asia and Singapore, I've never been afraid of them because you can't be afraid of something that's around you all the time. And we'd have snakes coming into our kitchen through the vents of our aircon. Even my kid birthday parties, my mom used to get snake charmers, our local snake charmers. I mean, not Disneyland things. It's real guys who would, be playing the flute, and cobras would come up, and we're all 4-year-olds loving it. I've had pet snakes, we've had reptiles, so I've always been interested in them, but I also think, there's some feminine energy there. There's probably some sort of witchy energy as well. They've sort of always been associated with female power, sort of historically speaking and mythologically speaking. So I've always been drawn to them, but I've never been afraid of them because of how I've been brought up. And I came across this brilliant shop in Knightsbridge in London called the Map Company, and they sell a one-off original first print edition, which is where I got the map from Italy. And I bought this boa because, again, had orange and olive running through it, which I knew was going to be the theme for my kitchen. It sort of kicked off a bit of an obsession. So I've got 5 of them now. They're all original from 1810. It is, I believe he's called John Wilkes, but he's known for his biological studies of flora and fauna, but he's particularly specialized in exotic snakes. Vipers and non-venomous alike. So I've got 5 of them. They're all different, and they're like my dealer. They keep on emailing, going, "We've got another one," and I have to ignore the emails because I think there's a point where I might get a little bit too much, and my other half might get a little concerned. But for now, the 5 that I've got are in pride of place. Big female energy. So this place always caught my eye because, well, in this area, there's quite a few unique warehouses. It's Southeast London, particularly around London Bridge and Borough, where we are, and Bermondsey Street, which this warehouse is just off of, has been really preserved. They've really taken care of a lot of the big iconic warehouses, and it's so close to the Thames, so it's always a significant place for storage as well during the Empire years. But I walk past this all the time because it had such a stunning facade in terms of classic Victoriana warehouse architecture, where they, brought beauty to even really functional spaces. It also had a name above the door in stone, which is called Hepburn and Gale, which, if you know the area, not a lot of the warehouses do have their original names up the front. And I did a bit of research, and it turns out this is, it's an old leather tannery, which again, the area is known for. A lot of the streets around here are named after. We've got Tanner's Yard, for instance, we've got Tanner Street. So they're all named after the area that would have been the industry here. We've even got Morocco Street, because a lot of the community around here would have been Moroccan leather traders. But this was a tannery, so it would have been the final stages of prepping the leather. And it actually is the place that was making the famous red leather briefcases that our British Chancellor of the Exchequer would hold up to the press, and this has been a tradition for a long time before there was even press, announcing the budget for the year. So that's their sort of their claim to fame. But I loved it just because it's got beautiful buildings. If you see from the front, it's got some arched crittle windows. The windows in this flat are all original crittle, so they're over 200 years old, and in still beautiful working order, which is again testament to Victorian design and architecture. They build things to last. Yeah, it just caught my eye because it was different, and it's a big building as well, so it's hefty. But I'd never been inside until I saw the for sale ad online, and it didn't disappoint. And actually everyone that lives in here, it has quite a creative soul to them. A lot of the other owners are designers or artists, so there's also that being quite a special little aspect. There's artwork that runs throughout the whole building, and as a group of owners, we also fund for art to be in here. So it's just little details like that that just felt like I was coming home even before I'd really stepped through the door. It just felt like it's got the bones here carry a lot of story, but there's clearly an appreciation for design and aestheticism, even going back to the fact that leather, it's a beautiful commodity that made, fashion pieces, ironically. So the living room, and this is where we, besides the kitchen, spend most of our time, and it's the biggest sofa I could find. It's from Living Divani, which is an Italian brand. It's all sectional and can come to pieces, so it's amazing for reupholstery, which is going to be my next project, is finding another color for this, or maybe even some more pattern, because there's no such thing as too much pattern. But for now, I'm sort of pulling through the play on color and blues and greens and creams and a bit of yellow, just through the pillows and other accent accessories that I've got throughout the living room space. But this is all about comfort and calm. Even though there's a chaos of pattern here, I feel like, you know, the rules with color, you don't need to have contrasting or complementary. I quite like things on a color spectrum. So obviously blues, greens, feel like they're falling along the same spectrum. I quite like the fact that there's not a lot of contrast, that they sort of blend together. I think you can get a lot of playfulness in pattern, but there's a calmness to the fact and a cohesion to the fact that they're sort of all playing a similar color space, whilst not being boring. Which is the big thing. I don't want my home to be boring. I want it to inspire me. And I think, again, I lie here often, pretty much every night, and I will catch myself sort of looking around the flat. And because there's so much to look at here, it's really good for me because my job is always about ideas, and that you don't do 9 to 5. I can look around this space and just pick up on a detail that might make me think of something else that's actually on my mind for work itself. But I never want to look around in my flat and be bored, which, with all the stuff that's going on, I never would. And color is a big part of that. I think, you know, having something mellow and red that sort of just like settles you in is also really important. I didn't want to have something like, I mean, on a practical note as well, I've got a dog that he's long and hairy and shaggy and he molts. So I wanted something where I could see the hair and I could remove it very quickly. And I don't know, with lighter colors, everything just blends in. So it's boring, and also you don't get to see where you need to vacuum a little bit more when your dog's been had an extra multi day. So these are, I've got, how many have I got? I've got about 8 of these windows running through the flat of different sizes, but these are the original factory windows. They're crittle and they open like this. Which is why I would never put double glazing anyway because it's ugly. But it would also mean that I can't actually open these windows, which in the summertime is particularly beautiful. But these are original lead crittle. And these curtains, actually, these are one of the only things I kept from the previous owner, including some of the light fixtures. These are all wool, heavy boiled wool. Each of them bespoke. They're bespoke for the flat, so no two are the same. Even as a pair, they're slightly different. But there's a lovely bit of detailing on here which says Made in Scotland by Reed and Taylor, which means, to me, I like the fact that they feel off-cut, and it feels like someone sort of just found lots of spare pieces from a tailor, maybe, or a wool factory. Again, trying to bring those industrial little details in. But I like the fact they've sort of cobbled it together to make these really heavy boiled wool curtains, which in the wintertime with no double glazing is a godsend. And also, you know, with these, they're quite industrial in all these radiators, but the pair mean that we have a very cozy winter. We never feel the cold or the draft, which is very typical of these old places you would. I knew I wanted to have a low, big coffee table for this space, because the sofa's quite low, it's quite tricky to get out of. Intentionally, it doesn't want you to get out of it once you're in it. So I wanted to have a coffee table that was quite expansive and low, easy to reach without exerting ourselves too much from the sofa. And I got this, actually I got this secondhand. I did a bit of hunting on eBay and someone was getting rid of it, which is quite rare, you know, to find something that's actually beautiful and works with your aesthetic and you find it on such an easy platform. But it's a green marble. And this piece is, it's from Iittala, which is a very famous glassware company, again, from Finland, from where I'm from. And I found this at a vintage market. I don't think the guy knew what he was selling because not everyone knows Iittala, but if you know Iittala, you know that what he was selling it for was a steal. And I didn't tell him or argue with him. I just didn't even bargain. I just took what he was charging and I put this under my arm and ran off very quickly. But it's there's a whole collection of them, and they are inspired. I know this because my grandparents collected Iittala pieces after the war. It's inspired by ice that's melting after winter in the spring. So it has all the rivets and gullies that are, you know, frozen and melting, which is really beautiful, and then sort of collects. So it's like not icicles, it's spring icicles, I like to call them, but it's a big bowl that acts as our catchment for all the stuff where we don't necessarily have space for. So the remotes, my nail files, hand creams, lighters, whatever. It's a catchment. So probably not what they designed it for, but I like giving it a bit more of a day-to-day function rather than treating it as a piece of art. Just give it some purpose. It's an old chair that I found online again when I was buying this place, and I had a couple of weeks before I was moving in. I wanted to have a sort of a classic armchair form. I didn't want everything to look too sort of mid-century. That can be overkill and look a bit cliche. So I wanted something that was a bit more of a classical shape, but I knew I wanted to upholster it with something that felt a bit more contemporary. And this is it's a velvet marbling, and it's done by a very famous here, Danish, I think she's Danish-Swedish interior decorator, Beata Newman. And she's famous for her interior fabrics that she does that are bespoke, but I bought a whole ream of them and then had this old piece redone in it, and it's a great reading chair, and I got some matching cushions because I had extra material, and the guy was very kind and made me some big old throws for it as well. And then this armchair is, I used to work for a furniture company, so this was a piece that they gifted me a long time ago. I did their advertising. They were a small local brand to where I live. So this is a piece I got. I didn't do anything to it. It was beautiful as it is. I've just chucked an old Scottish blanket on there for the winter for when we get a bit chilly. Man, this is a nice area for us to sit and chat and hang out after dinner with our friends. But this is like the throne. These are snakes that you'd find in Sweden and Finland. We don't have venomous. I think we've got one venomous type of snake in Scandinavia, but these are a couple of the non-venomous snakes that we've got up there. Again, I found the piece a long time ago in Singapore. It's sort of, it's a sort of a little guy on his throne. I don't think he's a significant royalty, but again, we have in Singapore, you can create your sort of area where you make offerings to ancestors. But I wanted to give it a bit more of a day-to-day function, not just ornamental, but have purpose behind it. So I turned him into a lamp and got the electrics installed and found a little Ikat Balinese style, actually it's more Balinese style, lampshade. So I get my Singaporean, Southeast Asian background brought into the home. And he's very nice at nighttime. He's a happy little chap. These are Swedish sconces as well. They're brass sconces that are typical for old Swedish country houses. I tend not to turn them on because I wouldn't want this place to go up in flames after all the love and effort that's gone into it. But again, wanting to thread some of my Swedish heritage in there. These are very typical from before electricity. The beauty of them is when you do light them, the brass is such a warm glow. It resonates outward. It's an amazing effect actually to have candlelight against brass. It really does illuminate. And of course, we're used to quite a lot of darkness in Finland and Sweden and Norway. So it's like bringing sunshine inside during the winter months. I highly recommend getting some of those. They are beautiful. This key is, I found this at a junkyard sale here in London. And from what I was told, so in London, and I don't know if it's elsewhere, but certainly in the UK, a lot of old shops would have signage hanging outside their shops denoting what they did. So pawnbrokers would have gold measuring and weighing scales and weights. And from what I was told from the guy that I bought this off, this is someone that made keys, unsurprisingly, so a key cutter or a locksmith. And that would have been hung outside his shop front. I don't know how old it is. It looks pretty old. But I know I had this space up here and I wanted something that ran across the length of it, but wasn't going to be too detracting because obviously this massive TV is here. And I didn't want something that sort of competed with it. And that sort of was like a bit of a trick of the eye, like you had to work a bit harder to see it, but when you saw it, it was a nice little surprise. And again, I just like this sort of the industrial British, shops and that sort of background that this place had as its origin, just bringing little little hints of that back in. I'm a very colorful person. I've been dyeing my hair since I was 12, so color is absolutely runs through what I do for a living and how I express myself. And because of my background growing up and sort of traveling around and living in lots of spaces and cultures as well, I've collected things for decades. And when I met up with James and Saskia, who run Howark, who envisioned the redesign of the place, they could see already that through my pieces that color was a really big deal for me. And I'd specified I wanted certain pops of color to run through the space. And I think they did a lot of lifting from what I have. Like green is a pretty big theme in my flat, as well as blues. But I'm very eclectic. I'm a maximalist. I like things that clash. I like things that shouldn't necessarily work together, like marbling and ikat textures, but they can if you know your color theory. I also studied color theory, obviously with my art degree. So I don't know, it's sort of just inherently in me. It's not something that I think I'm conscious of. It's just how when you live and breathe and think, that's how I treat color as well. I couldn't imagine living in a greyish or beige world. Color is an opinion to me. It is very typically British, although I'm not British. I think that's maybe something that's also rubbed off. We like to bring the color inside. If you watch any sort of interiors home shows over here over the past decades, there's some interesting color choices, not necessarily mine. But color is a big factor for us, definitely. So, unsurprisingly, this is the kitchen. And it used to be, when I bought the flat, it was actually half of what the bathroom is now. It was this tiny galley office-style kitchen, really depressing. And my partner and I are really tall. We'd hit our heads on things. So we've come into literally, this is my dream kitchen. It is exactly what I envisioned or hoped for. And James and Saskia at Howark did, they just took what was inside my brain and spilled it out across the space. Particularly love it because of my orange Smeg kitchen stove and oven. We just did a rotisserie chicken in there last night. It's that big, it can handle that. But I love the color, I love the boldness. I kind of like how retro it is, a bit bad taste, good taste as well. And my olive, and it's a big bit of dominant olive. But what I love about it is that it just feels happy. And it's also just, green is obviously such a healthy color. It's a color that does promote appetite as well. So, there's little subliminals that come in with that. But my secondary favorite thing, besides the big retro orange oven, is this island. Because it's got reclaimed copper on the surface, and I had said to the team that have brought this kitchen to life, I said I wanted something that wasn't precious. I don't want marble. Everyone has marble. It is a nightmare to work with, especially if you're prolific cooks like we are. I wanted something that felt industrial to the space. So when they proposed the reclaimed copper, I just got really excited because it picks up on every time we juice a lemon, it oxidizes and you get the tarnish off again. So you get that lovely copper pink coming through, but then the light hits it and it will darken. So this particular surface will age with us and it will build patina. And it reflects light as well at nighttime when we've got the downlighters. It just glows. So it's very cool. It's an underused material. I like the fact that it's sustainable because it's reclaimed and recycled. It's not new, so we've not created any new harm and giving it a new life. But it also feels like it was completely in keeping with a workshop space, which again, this being a leather tannery, just felt right. But of course, I wanted some pretty details in there as well. I banned chrome from the home. Chrome is it's so overused and ubiquitous and doesn't have warmth to it. And again, I think I want a home as much as possible that just wraps around you. So wherever we could, we got brass running through from the awesome tap with its lovely shower detail to my pot filler. And I love this cross-hatching tiles that James and Saskia suggested that we use, again, it's just that little detail that gives it a little bit more warmth whilst feeling really functional and not just, decorative for the sake of it. This piece is from the same girls that had the Polish vintage poster company, But this is actually, it's what I love about it. I mean, I love the colors anyway. It's that duck shell blue and the olive green. And I bought this years before I had the flat. So again, it's sort of subliminally all the colors that I've kind of been collecting over the years coming to life. But this is a Swedish film. But it's all written in Polish. So it's a Polish film festival promoting a Swedish film. And I just love the significance of the, you know, hers and his hand dancing into the future, because this is where my partner and I do, this is our love language, and this is where we dance around each other when we're cooking together as a pair. So it had to be right at the heart of the kitchen as far as I'm concerned. So my partner and I are, you know, I don't like to blow my own horn about things, especially with work stuff. I would never, but with cooking, I'm a very good cook, and so is he. And it was probably the first, it's a thing we talk about all the time, but certainly on the first date it was. And we tend to make where we come from. So he makes fresh pasta almost every couple of days. He will get up at 11 p.m. at night and start rolling out dough for pizza dough to prove overnight, and then we'll make pizza the next day, or focaccia. But I was also like, I'm an Italian, you know, I like my Italian cooking, and I would do risotto. And actually, when I made risotto for him for the first time, he said it was the best risotto he'd ever had. So that was a massive relief, but also just a little, you know, obviously I can cook, especially for an Italian. But my big thing that I brought to our relationship, for our cooking relationship, was Southeast Asian food. Again, I was born in Singapore. Chili is the first flavor I can remember, so I'm big on spice, and it has to be, you know, sweaty hairline, sweaty brow, you know, lip line, all of that. Otherwise, it's not really chili. So I cook a lot of Thai food. I cook a lot of Singaporean food, which is a beautiful blend of Malay, Indonesian, Indian, and Southern Chinese cuisines. It's a real melting pot, like myself. Actually, we made dough last night for noodles. We're going to make hand-pulled noodles tonight for dinner. So it is very much, we both cook our heritage. And I'm proud to say that he is an Italian that can handle his chili, because it would have been a deal breaker if I had to temper my chili levels for him. My wooden spoons, my cooking, which is not, again, what it was probably designed for, but this was a later addition. When I started realizing that a lot of companies were finding these fruit ceramics, I actually contacted the makers. They're a Dutch company called Despots, which is very clever, but they're based in Holland. And I emailed them and I said, have you got any new things coming out that are citrus themed? Because the lemons are everywhere. And they actually emailed me and said, actually, we've got some limes coming. And when they showed me this one, I said, I have to have it because it's exactly the same color as my kitchen. And they're not selling them in the UK. They assured me that they wouldn't be selling the limes. They weren't coming here. So I went straight to the manufacturer, which again, I tend to do that. Like, I will find plates in restaurants that I like. I'll look underneath the plate and I'll see where the company is, and I'll email them and buy direct from them rather than go to a retailer. You know, just you get a better deal. You might get stuff that no one else can get, and again, it's part of that hunt mentality of trying to find the goodies through the chaff. So when we were drawing up the designs for the flat, I didn't want everything to be hidden away. Equally, I'm not a fan of having exposed shelves with plates and whatnot around. So I wanted to kind of have a balance, but I just think glassware is so pretty, and it tends to get hidden away a lot of the time. So I just wanted to bring it out. I mean, there's nothing this is all very utilitarian pieces. There's a lot of glassware, again, from Italy. This is, you know, every self-respecting Finnish person has Italy in their house. So I've got a lot of Italy glassware, a lot of espresso glasses, because my partner, I said he's Italian, he has a coffee company, he's got a roastery. So we drink a lot of coffee and he takes it very seriously. So there's a lot of iterations of espresso cups in there. And just, you know, lots of wine glasses, because we like drinking a lot of wine, and a lot of champagne glasses for when we have parties. So it's just, you know, making the functional have a fair shot at feeling beautiful as well. But I do like to put purpose into everything. There's nothing in there that we wouldn't use or knock about. There's nothing that's like precious crystal at all. We want stuff that we can throw around and, you know, live with rather than just look at. And inside, I don't know if you can see, I can sort of open them up. There's an Alpine pair there, I think, little Germans. My mum's side of the family were Jewish German immigrants that they left during the war, obviously. but maybe it's sort of some perverse humor I have about having two very blonde, blue-eyed Alpine children from Germany in my cupboard. I like to think they're Hansel and Gretel. And maybe I'm the witch. Again, I wanted to have bar stools, but I didn't want bar stools that are just the stools where your body starts clumping over and you don't want to sit there. I wanted it to feel like lounge chairs, but just elevated to the bar level. And actually it was really hard to find. And I didn't want things that jumped out. I wanted them to sort of blend in again, so that, you know, when depending where you're looking at, you can still see the whole kitchen and it's not distracting. So the black was intentional, and having this sort of deep curve, the herringbone bend to the rear was really important, so people can lounge there. Sometimes we put pillows behind there, but we spend a lot of time here when Simone and I are just the two of us, and with certain meals where we want to eat there and it's sort of a bit picky, or having a bit sort of a mezze rather than a proper formal dinner, we'll sit here and snack and talk and listen to music, but we lounge in these things. Sometimes we watch TV from here as well. We'll just swivel around and relax. But I intentionally wanted to have backs on them, because there's bar stools without backs are not comfortable. I don't know why no one has figured this out, but they're really not. So we schlepped this all the way from Simone's town in Italy. They do an amazing antiques fair there every second Sunday. And it weighs a ton. It's old marble. It's about 300 years old. And it's got all the grooves in it from whatever woman who owned it, and I presume it was a woman because it was Italy, and the kitchen is their domain. But it's got the hand grooves on there, and I don't believe this is the pestle that came with it, that was originally for it, but they sold it with it, and it's a good size. Also makes a very good weapon. If I need to defend myself in case there's an intruder, this is the thing I would run for. But we crush spices in there for Thai curries. We have made pesto in there. Obviously, it is amazing for making pesto. And we carried it on our backs. We bought a backpack for it and went through Milan airport in it, and it weighs a ton. And I'm very glad that Simone carried it for me. But he bought me this for my 40th birthday. My other half has been in the coffee industry probably most of his adult life in one way or another in Italy. But he and his business partner started a small roastery in South London a couple of years ago, about 6 years ago. And they make beautiful coffee. I'm obviously very biased, but they have taken the learnings from their upbringing, because funnily enough, Italian coffee is not that great. That's their words, not mine. If you go to Italy, it's quite generic, but they have transformed the beans. They've got a whole range that are beautiful. So I get spoiled. I get his coffee every morning, and he'll bring him a fresh batch from whatever he's roasted that week. And he bought this. I didn't have anything to do with this. He bought this grinder because it's top notch. It's one of the best in the business, he says, and he should know. But he bought it particularly to have it orange to match our oven. And next to it is possibly one of the most romantic things anyone's ever done for me. This is a La Pavone coffee machine from the 60s, and it was my father's. And he used to make espressos on them every day that I was growing up. And when he passed away, it obviously went into storage. And then I met Simone, and I told him about it, and it turned out he had worked for La Pavone in his 20s as an engineer. So he knew how to repair these things. So I got it boxed up from my mom's house in Singapore and schlepped over here, and Simone repaired it, restored it, cleaned it, and bought loads of internal bits and pieces that made it work again. So I make coffee every morning with my dad's La Pavone espresso machine. That is just, it proves it's a brilliant machine, but it also, that continuity, this would be something I would save in a fire, probably above more other things that are in this flat because of the significance of it. I will have an espresso at night. And you know why? Because it's a myth that you can't sleep on espressos. You can't sleep on bad quality espressos. So the worse the quality, the higher the caffeine, because it's a response in the cherry to pests, which is on lower altitude. High altitude coffee has less need for pest response, and so there's less caffeine in it. So you just have to buy a good quality bean from a higher altitude, and then you won't have restless nights. So at nighttime I'll have an espresso, maybe even two, depending on how the night is going. And in the morning I will have a flat white made with this old machine. The thing that really drew me to the place initially was that it's just a space that begs you to have people around it, just because it's so open and everything flows. So we kind of treat it 50-50. Intentionally designed the kitchen so it would be open plan and it would be convivial, and it would mean that my partner and I are big cooks. He's from Italy, so obviously food is like number one priority for him. It is possibly the thing we talk about more than anything else, is what we're going to have for dinner the night before we go to bed. So the kitchen was really important. It was the brief I gave to Howark as well, to James and Saskia. I wanted somewhere that we could cook, we could have space to have all our gadgets, but also it meant that we could have people round and there wasn't this sort of separation, which again is a very British thing. If you look at a lot of old school Victorian homes, the kitchen would have been kept out the back and the dining out the front, so it was a sort of them and us, whereas we obviously wanted to break down those walls. So we have people over, we cook a lot, but because, especially with my job being as busy and as stressful as it is, I definitely, this is a sanctuary space. I'm, as I said, a magpie, so everything, I like having all my things around me, and I have a big roll top bath now that I never used to have, and that is a big deal as well. I have to have a bath every night just to decompress. So it's a little bit of both. It's a sanctuary, but it's also a space that we have people that we love around, and like to introduce and bring people together that don't know each other. But above all else, it's just to feed everyone. Is a really good example. It stands testament to why the working relationship between James, Saskia, and myself was just meant to be. I had mentioned to them in our initial chats that red is a significant color in most parts of Asia, particularly in China and Hong Kong and Singapore. Within the Chinese community, it's an auspicious color. It is used in weddings and New Year, and every home I've ever had growing up in Singapore, we've had a red door, whether that's internally or externally, and glossy red as well. So I'd mentioned that, and this originally, like most of the flat that when I found it, was gray. And I had never said, I want a red door. I had just said, there's always been red running through my house. And they did this as a bit of a surprise for me when we came to completion, and I loved it. And I just love the fact that they heard me. And actually, it's the perfect kind of doors for it. So I think it really pulls the room together and makes sense of why there are pops of red, but also works really well with the greens and even the yellows. But it is my good luck door, and it opens up into what was the walk-in wardrobe from the previous owner. But now it is a really cozy, sunny, warm little second bedroom. And again, so imagine this space here was all LED lighting, chrome, mirrors, heavy black wood, walk-in wardrobe and shoe gallery for the previous owner's wife. And Saskia and James had suggested that we cut out, we've actually kept most of the cupboard space, but we just added paneled doors, and then we cut out this middle section, and they have installed this sort of bed nook. But I said I wanted to have a double bed, and obviously this space is a bit of an awkward one. It's actually the exterior of the warehouse, and under here would have been the spiral staircase that ran down to the very bottom of the factory. We're at the very top of the building right now, so there's nothing above. But I loved the fact that there were these high vaulted ceilings, which again is very rare in a warehouse. It's very rare in London in general. But it's an awkward space. And this was my big brief to any of the designers that I was chatting to, was like, what would you do with this to make it feel livable and usable? But also I need storage, because again, these flats, these conversions, they don't naturally come with storage. So they came up with this idea of cutting it out and turning it into this nook, but it actually rolls out to be a double bed. So under here is another piece, and it raises up, and it's brilliant. It's great quality, and everyone that slept in here says they have the sleep of a lifetime. So that's pretty much testament to their thinking, and they sort of checked off the brief. But they did this great. They installed this paneled sort of backrest with beautiful ikat. I've got some silhouettes from my great-grandmother from Sweden that I've installed in there. It's a little chance to have a gallery of family photos. I don't tend to put family photos around the house. They're super personal, so I wanted to have just one space. For them, I've got this weird little mezzanine that goes up to storage. That's the next project. It's to design some really beautiful cabinetry up there. But for now, it's sort of hiding a lot of scariness and Christmas decorations. And then, but it also, they managed to make sense of how I could have flow into my little work area, which is, I'm a copywriter and creative director, so I do a lot of script writing. And I have to write at any time of night. I don't write 9 to 5, it could be at 2 in the morning, and I wanted a quiet space to do that. So this space down here was nothing. It had a big black panel bit of wood walls, so all of that light was cut out from the back window, and they just knocked it out, opened it up, and installed green carpets, of course. This is my dog's favorite area, which he hasn't done any accidents down there, but I'd like to think he thinks it's his own little personal garden down there. He's there all the time. If I can't find him, I go look and I find Finn down there. But it's my office, I write down there. And funnily enough, when I was looking at this place, when I came in to look at this place, this was the reason I decided I wanted to buy it, because I could see that it wasn't being used the way it could be used. And it had these epic windows that you just couldn't see or appreciate. And all of this beautiful original brickwork. And this brick is called London brick, and it's very hard to find these days. It is original to London, most sort of Regency period, Georgian period, some Victorian, although they tend to do more red brick, but it is clay made from the Thames, so it has this distinctive yellow tone to it. And I saw this running throughout this space more than I did the flat itself, because a lot of it's plastered and walls, and you don't really get that brick effect, but this had the most amount of brick, and this was the reason I decided I needed to buy the flat. Also, the previous owners had boxed up half of the Crittall windows and covered a lot of the tile work. So I didn't know that actually running throughout this room were these beautiful curved original ceramic tiles. The boxing came up to here. It was horrific, but I could see a little hint of it when I was sort of nosing around when the estate agent wasn't looking. And I had a feeling that there's some gems under here. So when my contractors and James and Saskia were doing their initial rip out of the space, they found how this sort of ran throughout, and it's this beautiful curving on the ledge. It runs behind here, and it runs all the way down to my little office space. So we wanted to bring it back to life. It's all been hidden and there's no shame in it. So, give it a new lease of life and let it sing. And I love the fact that Saskia and James understood that red is that significant color, because I also collected a lot of artwork from my life growing up in Singapore and traveling around the region, and red pops up a lot. So I've got an original sign from a Singaporean primary school, not my primary school, but a primary school near where I grew up, that was being torn down, and these would have been in the classroom. It's the saying from Singapore, Majulah Singapura, which is sort of like, it's a Malay word. It means sort of, strength for Singapore, with the lion and the tiger, which is our national symbols there, which again I've got on the floor. This I was given by my mum on my wedding. And it's a Tibetan rug from Tibet, but it is quite unique because these are quite seen everywhere now, these cutout tiger rugs. But this is an original meditation rug, which means that it doesn't have the sort of gimmicky cutout, and it would be used for meditation purposes by monks. It's quite old. I don't have an exact sense of the age, but I know it's over 150 years old because it's what the dealer told us. But I just like the fact that he's got quite a quirky face. He's a lot more embellished than those tiger rugs you see knocking about these days. It's all made of silk as well, and just having that tiger theme pulled through. And then I've got random... These are Chinese Singaporean ads, because I work in advertising and I love old advertising. And these are beautiful, glamorous women from the 60s, and they're selling indigestion pills, of course. Because so they're for new life and vigor, and for sensational Japanese discovery for stomach pains. There's all these sort of, I love the use of, as a copywriter, again, just how advertising used to speak, but also how it looked, and the colors are great. So of course, color. I've got some Singaporean advertising up there for prawn crackers. It's all around, and it's all Singapore. So I kind of call this my Singapore room, because it's where I can house a lot of my memories, and I don't need to make them sort of flood out into the whole room. This is photos from upbringing there. Obviously, lots of thematic stuff coming through with the pieces too. this is where we catch all our Z's, our much needed Z's, before we face London again the next day. And it's possibly, it's the smallest bedroom I've ever had, but actually I quite liked it. It was quite womb-like. And we sort of played into that with James and Saskia. We painted it this really lovely buff putty pink. I didn't want this to be a dark room. It did start off dark actually when I bought it. All of the girders were black along here. One of the walls was black. The carpets are grey. It just felt really oppressive and a bit too over masculine as well. And it obviously has this beautiful bit of brickwork and a very cool, very different crystal window from the rest of the windows throughout the house. So you have to open it with a latch and you pull it and it's sort of cantilevers and then you tighten it and it opens like this. I've never seen a window like this. I love the fact that it's in the bedroom as well, and much needed in winter time, in the summertime when we need to cool off. And again, the boiled wool curtains that I inherited from the previous owner. But this room, it's small and cozy, and we sleep incredibly well here. But I also wanted to bring a lot of my, the special pieces through that are quite significant, and there's a lot. So these two pieces I inherited from my Swedish-Finnish grandparents. And they are by quite a famous Swedish painter called Håkan Brunnberg. And he always does sort of themes around religion. I'm not religious. We didn't grow up religious. And I've obviously come from quite a few faith backgrounds with my families. But I looked at these as a kid and thought they were awfully naughty. I remember them being in my grandparents' home and thinking, there's a lot of nudity going on. There's a lot of sexual undertone going on, which I loved even at that age, and I didn't quite understand that probably was quite taboo. But this is Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. And I was stroking, I think it looks like my other half and I, because I'm a redhead and he's a dark Italian man. But it's on the artist's paint palette. So he's probably done a painting and then just used up all the extra paint by doing a piece on here. And this is Adam giving the apple to multiple Eves. So again, it's quite taboo, it's sort of going against all the sort of scriptures and how we're taught of those mythological stories came to be. And I like the fact that it's sort of a bit of a Charlie's Angel. There's a blonde, a brunette, a redhead, and then a sort of more of a ginger going on. But he's offering them up, so slightly misogynistic as well. But I quite like the fact that he's playing with all those sort of themes and sort of messing with them a little bit. And then this is an original piece from Herman Miller, the furniture design company. And I love the stories of these. There's actually a few of these pieces from the graphic designer who created these every year. They're for Herman Miller Design summer parties. They would have these great summer parties for their employees, and they do a theme. And the posters were always macro close-ups of picnic themed things like watermelon or cake. And this is quite a kitsch. Pork and pineapple, which I don't know anyone that would bring that to a picnic, but hey ho, it was the 70s. But I love these. I love the wit of them and love the color. And a couple of them are in MoMA as well. I haven't had it valued, but I will never sell this because there are loads of reproductions, but this is an original and they're very hard to get your hands on. And this is, I call this my plant lamp. I just like that it should be sort of at a Parisian bistro or in, sort of some romance novelist boudoir. But I bought it in Goldbourne Road at one of the flea markets there, very famous flea market in London. And I got it for 20 quid and just fixed it up. And it has this beautiful diffused light. And the last thing I'd like to talk about, well, there's two things, but these are my moon phases. And this is probably one of my most sentimental things that I own in the house, besides the coffee machine. And I had just signed my divorce papers and I was taking myself out for lunch, and I was in Mayfair, and I trotted into a gallery and I saw on the walls these moons, and they're done by the same illustrator that did my snakes. That's how I got to know about these. But these show the phases of the moon from full to almost completely gone. And I just thought it was significant. I was coming out of one phase and into another, and I bought them on the spot. They were already framed, and I knew I wanted them in my bedroom, and I knew I wanted them to be something that I lay in bed and looked at night. So I love the fact that there's obviously a nighttime theme going on, but also it's sort of representative of how we shift and change. And obviously as a woman, the moon and the phases and, 28 days and all that, it's all significant. And this is my clothes babe. She's an 80s original IKEA clothes horse, and she's, you know, she's had better days, but she's been around a long time, and I like the kind of 80s kitschness of it as well. And she usually hangs out pajamas on her during the day. And I've had a lot of homes in my life because of my family's background and how I was brought up. But this is the first home that has felt like a home. And I think that's because of the fact that it is mine and entirely earned. It's not a place that, you know, I'm renting and it sort of has a transitory feel to it. It's a home that is absolutely mine because of everything that's in it. And it's the first place that I've been able to express outwardly how I feel inwardly. I think it's the first home that absolutely is a pure reflection of my personality and my, you know, sometimes my beliefs even, my education. I think you would know very quickly it's me if you didn't know I was here, but, you know, friends of mine or people who are close, if they walked around, they'd know immediately it was me, just because it is such a, there's almost no boundary between me and it. It's the first place I've been able to manifest who I am and how I see the world in a space, without obviously, you know, the sort of the limitations that come when you're sharing a space with someone else, or when it's not entirely yours, or you're at an earlier stage in your life where maybe you don't have the means to fully find those pieces that are truly you. But also I think it's just an accumulative thing where I'm 42 now, and this is 20 plus years of me learning to be me and to find things that really matter to me, and also a lot of editing along the way. This home means everything to me, and I said it when I moved in, that I want to own this home even when I'm in my 80s. I want to have this as a space that I can come back to, even if it's not necessarily where I live forever permanently. This is a marker of my life in London. This is the place that makes me a Londoner as well, which is really important. It's also why I wanted to live in Southeast London, in London Bridge, because it is historically, it's the first borough that was founded in London, way back before the Romans, but the Romans established themselves here. So as a foreigner myself, this is my stake in the ground as a Londoner. Thank you for coming. Thank you for taking your shoes off too and being a polite guest. I hope you had a good time, and hopefully see you around in London again. Bye.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to go to homeworthy.com for exclusive content, shopping guides, and so much more.